They moved my fence 10 feet, so I moved their entire entrance. That's the short version, the one my buddy Ray likes to tell over beers like it's some kind of joke, but it didn't feel like a joke at the time. It felt like someone had walked right up to my front door, kicked it open, and then smiled like they were doing me a favor. And the worst part, they thought I wouldn't do a damn thing about it. Now I've been living on that land a long time, longer than most folks around here have even been alive. 42 acres, give or take, out past Hollow Creek Road. Nothing fancy, just pasture, a weathered barn, a small house that creaks in the winter and breathes in the summer. My dad bought it back when land was still something regular people could afford, and I never saw a reason to leave. It's quiet out there, the kind of quiet you don't notice until it's gone. For years, my western boundary was marked by the same fence my dad and I patched up together when I was a kid. Old cedar posts, barbed wire sagging in places, rust creeping through like it had earned the right to stay. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest, and more importantly, it was right where it was supposed to be. On the other side of that fence, though, things started changing a few years back. Used to be just more open land, same as mine. Then one day, survey stakes showed up, then bulldozers, then crews working sunup to sundown. Before long, they carved out a whole neighborhood where there used to be nothing but grass and wind. They called it Redstone Valley. And if you've ever seen one of those developments, you already know the type. Big houses lined up like they were stamped out of the same mold, fresh paint, trimmed hedges, driveways wide enough to land a small plane. Everything clean, everything polished, everything just a little too perfect. Didn't bother me much at first. People build where they want, long as they stay on their side of the line. That's the thing about boundaries. They only work if everyone agrees they matter. Now, I had to head out of town for about a week. My older brother Caleb runs cattle up near the Montana line, and he'd been having a rough season, so I drove up to help him brand and move a few herds before the weather turned. Left everything as it always was, fence standing where it had stood for 4 decades, leaning a bit, but still doing its job. When I came back, something fell off before I even got out of the truck. You ever get that feeling, like your brain notices something wrong before you can put your finger on it? I slowed down as I pulled up the gravel drive, engine idling low, just staring out the windshield. The line where my land met theirs, it looked too straight, too clean. That's when I saw it. The old fence was gone. Every single post, every stretch of barbed wire, gone like it had never been there. In its place stood this tall, cream-colored vinyl fence, the kind you see in magazines, smooth panels, perfectly aligned, running in a dead straight line from the road all the way back toward the tree line. And it wasn't just new. It was wrong. I stepped out of the truck slow, boots crunching on gravel, and just stood there for a second, trying to make sense of it. Because that fence, it wasn't where my fence used to be. It was 10 feet into my land. 10 feet might not sound like much, not when you're talking about open country, but stretch that across the length of my frontage, and you're talking about a whole strip of land, wide enough to matter, valuable enough that nobody just accidentally moves it. I walked along it, running my hand over the smooth surface, and that's when I noticed something else. Bolted right near the front was a stone monument sign. Big thing. Solid. Set into a poured concrete base like it wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. It read, "Welcome to Redstone Valley." I remember letting out this quiet little laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so bold it almost felt like a joke. Welcome to my land. I didn't storm over there, didn't call anyone, didn't start yelling. That's not really how I handle things. Instead, I headed to the barn, figuring maybe someone had left a note, some explanation, some attempt at making this make sense. And there it was. A plain white envelope, taped right to the door. No name, no signature, just a typed sheet inside. Boundary alignment completed in accordance with Community Master Plan. That was it. No apology, no heads up, not even a phone number. Just a statement. I read it twice, standing there in the shade of the barn, feeling something settle in my chest. Not anger exactly. Not yet. More like a slow, steady kind of clarity. They hadn't made a mistake. They'd made a decision. And somewhere along the line, they decided I didn't matter enough to ask. I walked back out toward the fence, eyes tracing that clean, perfect line, and I could already see how it happened. If you didn't know the land, if you just looked quick, it almost looked right. Like it had always been there. But I knew better. I'd grown up walking that boundary, fixing those posts with my dad, measuring out distances the old way, step by step, memory by memory. You don't just forget where your land ends. I went inside, dug out the old survey map from a drawer I hadn't opened in years, and spread it out across the kitchen table. Paper was worn at the edges, lines faded a bit, but the measurements were still clear. I grabbed a shovel and headed back out. Took me a little while, but I found the original pins buried under fresh dirt, just like I figured they would be. Still in place. Still exactly where they'd always been. They hadn't moved the boundary. They just ignored it. And standing there, looking from those pins to that brand new fence, to that stone sign planted deep into what was still, legally, my land. That's when the feeling finally showed up. Not loud, not explosive, just quiet resolve. Because people like that, they count on you making a scene, acting emotional, looking like the unreasonable one. I wasn't going to give them that. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and made a call. Not to them, to a surveyor. And as I stood there waiting for him to pick up, eyes still locked on that sign. I remember thinking one simple thing. If they wanted to redraw the line, I was going to make sure we all saw exactly where it really was. The surveyor showed up 2 days later, just after sunrise. One of those crisp mornings where the air still carries a bit of chill, and everything feels sharper than usual. His name was Travis, mid-40s maybe, quiet guy, didn't waste words. Stepped out of his truck, nodded once, and got straight to work like he'd done this 1,000 times before, which he probably had. I walked him along the edge of the property, told him what I knew, showed him where the old fence used to run. He didn't say much at first, just listened, occasionally glancing toward that vinyl fence like it offended him on a professional level. "Let's find your pins," he said. Took us a while. Dirt had been pushed around, landscaping done, everything smoothed over real nice. But those pins were still there, just like I'd found the day before, buried, not removed. Travis crouched down, brushed away the dirt, checked the coordinates, then stood up and looked at me. "They didn't move anything," he said. I figured. He gave a small nod, then grabbed a bundle of bright orange flags from the back of his truck. "Let's show them where it actually is." Now, if you've never seen a proper survey line marked out, it's almost satisfying in a strange way. One by one, those flags went into the ground, each one placed with careful precision, stretching out in a straight line that didn't care about fences or signs or anyone's master plan. And that line, it didn't just run alongside their entrance. It cut straight through it, right down the middle of their brand new road. I remember standing there, hands on my hips, watching Travis plant those flags across fresh asphalt and neatly edged gravel, thinking, well, that's going to be a problem. Because when they moved my fence, they didn't just take a strip of pasture. They moved their entire entrance with it. Half that road, the part every car had to drive over to get in and out of Redstone Valley, sat squarely on my land. Travis finished up, wiped his hands on his jeans, and looked over the scene like a man admiring clean work. "You want a formal report?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, "and I want it done right." He gave a small smile. "Always is." By that afternoon, I had everything I needed: measurements, documentation, official markings. Not opinions, not guesses, facts. And facts don't argue. That night, I didn't call anyone. Didn't send a letter, didn't give them a warning. I just moved my tractor. It's an old machine, nothing fancy, but it runs solid, and more importantly, it's big enough that people tend to go around it instead of through it. I drove it out to the front, right where those orange flags crossed the entrance road, right where my land began, according to every legal document that mattered. Then I shut it off, left the hazard lights blinking, climbed down, and set up a folding chair beside it. Next morning, things got interesting. See, what I hadn't really paid attention to before all this was timing. Turns out, that weekend was their big open house event. The kind where they bring in potential buyers, put out little signs, maybe offer coffee and cookies, try to sell the idea of peaceful country living, with just enough polish to make it feel upscale. Only problem was, their peaceful country living now came with a farmer sitting in a chair, blocking half their entrance. I got there early, coffee in hand, thermos still warm, just watching the sun come up over the fields. For a while, it was quiet, just the hum of insects, the occasional bird, same as always. Then the first car showed up, slowed down, hesitated, then tried to ease around the tractor. Didn't work. They rolled down the window, looked at me like they weren't sure if I was part of the attraction or the problem. "Mornin'," I said, lifting my cup a little. Is this open? The driver asked. I shrugged. Depends who you ask. That pretty much set the tone for the rest of the morning. By 9 o'clock, there was a line of cars backing up toward the highway. People getting out, checking their phones, looking confused, a few getting annoyed. And me? I just sat there. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't argue. Just stayed put. Around mid-morning, I saw him coming. You can always tell who's in charge. They walk a little faster, like the world's already behind schedule. His name, I'd later learn, was Daniel Harper, president of the Redstone Valley HOA. Mid-50s, clean-cut, polo shirt tucked in just right, sunglasses on like he was expecting to deal with something unpleasant. He walked straight up to me, glanced at the tractor, then at the flags, then back at me. You're blocking our road, he said. Not angry, not yet. More like he was stating a fact he expected me to correct. I took a slow sip of coffee, then reached over to the folder sitting on the chair beside me. No, I said, handing him a copy of the survey. I'm parked on my land. He didn't take it right away. Just looked at me, then at the paper, like accepting it would somehow make this situation real. Finally, he grabbed it, scanned the first page, then flipped to the map. I watched his expression shift, just slightly. This has to be a mistake, he said. Funny thing about measurements, I replied. They don't really do mistakes twice. He exhaled through his nose, glanced back at the growing line of cars, then lowered his voice a bit. Our contractor handled the boundary adjustment, he said. There must have been a miscommunication. Yeah, I said. Seems like it. Another pause. Well, he continued, we'll get it sorted out. But right now, you're disrupting access for residents and potential buyers. I leaned back in my chair, letting that sit for a second. Right now, I said, you're using land you don't own. That was the moment the tone changed. You could feel it, like something tightening just beneath the surface. He straightened up, folded the survey in half, and handed it back to me. We'll have our legal team review this, he said. In the meantime, I'd ask that you move your equipment. I shook my head. In the meantime, I said, this stays right here. For a second, I thought he might argue, push a little harder. But he didn't. Instead, he just gave me a tight smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, turned around, and walked back toward the entrance, already pulling out his phone. By early afternoon, things were unraveling on their side. I could see it in the way people were talking in small groups, pointing at the flags, at the tractor, at me. Some left. Some stayed, probably hoping it would resolve itself. It didn't. And that's when I made the next move. Because this wasn't just about a fence anymore. It was about intent. I went back inside around lunchtime, sat down at the kitchen table, and started making calls. First, I filed a formal complaint. Trespassing. Land encroachment. Used the survey as evidence. Documented everything. The fence, the sign, the road. Then I called the county planning office. Spoke to a woman named Linda. Been there long enough that she didn't bother with small talk. I asked her one question. Did Redstone Valley receive approval to relocate their main entrance? There was a pause on the line, papers shuffling in the background. No, she said finally. They did not. I thanked her, hung up, and just sat there for a second, staring at the table. Because that right there, that was the piece that mattered. This wasn't a mistake. It was a shortcut. And now, it was about to cost them. By the time I walked back out to the road, the sun was starting to dip a little, casting long shadows across the field, across the flags, across that shiny new entrance that suddenly didn't look so permanent anymore. Traffic was still backed up. Voices were louder. And somewhere down the line, I saw Daniel again. This time, he wasn't alone. He had someone with him. Suit. Briefcase. The kind of person who only shows up when things have already gone wrong. I took another sip of coffee, leaned back in my chair, and waited. Because now, they were finally ready to talk. They didn't rush this time. Daniel and the guy in the suit walked slower, more measured, like they understood something had shifted and they were stepping into a situation they couldn't just smooth over with a handshake and a polite smile. The man with him introduced himself first. Elliot Crane, he said, extending a hand. I represent Redstone Valley Development. I shook it, firm but not friendly, then nodded toward the tractor. Welcome to my property. That landed. You could see it in the way Elliot's expression tightened just a fraction, like he was already calculating angles, outcomes, costs. Daniel stayed quiet this time, which told me everything I needed to know about who was actually in charge now. Elliot glanced down at the survey in my hand. We've reviewed the preliminary documentation, he said, voice calm, practiced. It appears there may have been an error during construction. May have, I repeated, not bothering to hide the edge in my voice. He didn't react. These situations, he continued, are not uncommon in developments of this scale. Contractors make adjustments in the field, sometimes without full alignment to recorded boundaries. I nodded slowly, like I was considering it. Yeah, I said. Funny how those adjustments always seem to make things bigger, nicer, more valuable. That earned me the slightest hint of a smile from him. Not amused, just acknowledging the point. Daniel shifted beside him, clearly less comfortable now. Elliot stepped forward, lowering his voice just enough to feel more personal. We'd like to resolve this quickly, he said. Our intention is to move the fence back to its proper location, remove the sign, and restore your land to its original condition. I let that hang in the air for a second, then shook my head. Too late. That was the word that changed everything. Daniel blinked. Too late? What do you mean too late? I stood up slowly from the chair, stretching a bit, like I had all the time in the world, because now I did. You poured concrete, I said, pointing toward the base of that stone sign. You ran irrigation. You landscaped. You built half your road across my land. I looked Elliot dead in the eye. That's not something you just roll back in a weekend. Silence. Not empty, heavy. You could hear cars idling behind them, people talking, the faint hum of frustration building in the background. Their perfect little open house weekend, turning into something else entirely. Elliot nodded once, slowly. So what are you proposing, he asked. And there it was. That moment. The one where the balance shifts. I walked over to the edge of the road, nudged one of the orange flags with my boot, then turned back to them. You've got two options, I said. Daniel crossed his arms. Let's hear them. Option 1. I continued. You tear it all out. Fence, sign, road, everything that crosses this line. Restore the land exactly how it was. Then you go back to the county, file the right permits, and build a new entrance somewhere that actually belongs to you. Daniel's face tightened immediately. That's not realistic, he said. I shrugged. It's legal. Then I raised a finger. Option 2. I let the pause stretch just a little longer than necessary. You keep it exactly as it is. Elliot's eyes narrowed slightly. Go on. You purchase a permanent easement, I said, for that 10-foot strip, full frontage length, at commercial access rates. Daniel let out a short laugh, like I'd just said something ridiculous. You're serious? I didn't smile. Completely. Elliot didn't laugh. He just watched me. And that's not all, I added. You pay back use for every day that road's been on my land without permission, plus every cost I've taken on. Survey, legal, filings, all of it. Now Daniel stepped forward. That's extortion, he snapped. I turned my head slightly, meeting his gaze. No, I said quietly. That's consequences. Another silence. Longer this time. Elliot finally looked away, glancing back at the entrance, the line of cars, the people watching, waiting. Then he looked at Daniel, not saying anything, but saying everything. They stepped aside for a moment, just out of earshot. I didn't try to listen. Didn't need to. I already knew the math they were doing. Tear everything out, delay the project, deal with permits, inspections, bad press, angry buyers, or pay. When they came back, Daniel looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. Elliot, on the other hand, looked settled. We'll need formal terms, he said. I nodded. You'll get them. And access, he added, gesturing toward the road. I glanced at the tractor, then back at him. You sign first. He held my gaze for a second, then gave a small nod. 48 hours, he said. 48 hours, I agreed. And just like that, it was done. Not officially, not on paper yet, but decided. I sat back down in my chair, picked up my coffee, now gone lukewarm, and took a slow sip as they walked away. The rest of that weekend didn't get better for them. By Monday, word had spread. People talk, especially when something doesn't fit the picture they've been sold. Buyers started asking questions, not just about the road, but about permits, about management, about what else might have been adjusted. Pressure builds fast when money's involved. By Wednesday, they signed. Every term. Permanent easement, recorded with the county. Commercial frontage valuation. Back pay. Fees. All of it. No argument. No negotiation. Just signatures. I watched Elliot sign the final page in the same calm way he'd handled everything else, Like this was just another line item, another problem solved. Daniel didn't look at me when it was done. Couldn't blame him. After that, things went quiet again. The kind of quiet I was used to. The tractor went back to the barn. The flags came out of the ground. The road stayed exactly where it was. Only difference now. Every single car that drives through that entrance, every delivery truck, every homeowner, every visitor chasing that picture-perfect country life. They're crossing land that isn't theirs. Land they pay for. Every month. And me? I still wake up to the same view. Same fields. Same air. Only now, there's a stone sign out front that reminds me of something every time I pass it. Not about them. About boundaries. Because here's the thing nobody likes to admit. It's never really about the 10 feet. It's about what happens when someone decides those 10 feet don't matter. So I'm curious. What would you have done? Would you have let them fix it and walk away, called it an honest mistake? Or would you have done exactly what I did and made sure they never forgot where the line really was? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with neighbors, HOAs, or anyone who thought they could take a little more than they should, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Because trust me, these stories, they happen more than you think.